Joining me right now is a member of Reform UK. He is one of their Red Wall parliamentary candidates at the next general election. He is currently a councillor and he is David White. Good afternoon to you, David.
Good afternoon, Julie.
Thanks for joining us. And I mean no disrespect to you at all based on this, but quite hard getting Reform UK people on. Lee Anderson is paid to be on another channel and isn't allowed in his contract to come on. Same is Richard Tice, your party leader. Again, I'm not quite sure, as most audiences of most TV and radio stations are happy about politicians not being available to be interviewed by other people because of who's paying their mortgage. But there we are. I feel the same way about that on our station as well. But there we are. David, let's talk about Lee Anderson. Do you think Lee Anderson is going to boost Reform UK's popularity and poll ratings?
Firstly, Julia, I'm available anytime, so just drop us a text. Lee Anderson, yeah, the Conservatives created the beast and they've unleashed him against them now. And I think people have got to ask the question, why is Lee Anderson so popular? Now, I campaign most days with surveys, with leaflets on the doorstep, and people tell me that Lee Anderson, he ought to join Reform. He's saying exactly what we're thinking. They also love, obviously, Nigel Farage for exactly the same reasons. So, yeah, if I'd have been in a position in the Conservative Party to try and placate Lee and keep him on board, that would have got all of my attention. Because now, Reform UK, after less than 3 years, have actually got an MP in the House of Commons that can speak out on our common sense policies. So massively damaging. And Lee talked, well, not Lee, people are talking about 9 or 10 potential defectors to Reform UK. It's interesting because Reform UK have put me in charge as the first point of contact for defectors. Now, when I took that role on a few months ago, I didn't realise.
Do you want me to hand out your number to people in case they want to get in touch?
No, people contact through the website. I can do. We can put it on screen now. No, people contact through the website and they are put in my direction. And I speak to these people, and these are anything from parish councillors to leaders of the council to ward councillors, bit of everything in there, mayors, deputy mayors, and upwards. And there's a pattern that emerges very, very quickly. These people are disaffected. I talk to very high quality local councillors who are in politics for the right reasons, to help people, to do a job for people. And they say, firstly, I ain't going to get elected. And secondly, I cannot campaign as a Conservative because the party's shifted so far. Now, people talk about Lee as being a journeyman. And as Lee said yesterday, he's not. His views have never changed. The Labour Party's views changed, and the Conservative Party.
And that's the thing a lot of people have been saying, and a lot of people have been getting in touch with our audience saying, yeah, it's the parties that have shifted, and they feel that they've not got what they thought they'd elected back in 2019 when Boris Johnson was leader. And of course, we've seen what happened with COVID and lockdown, changed a lot of things. But in terms of other policies, getting back to normal politics, they still feel they're kind of getting, a lot of people are saying, look, they're getting Labour light rather than with net zero and the immigration situation and all of that, that they're actually not real in public services and high taxes. They're not getting what they thought they were getting. Here's the thing, though. What can Reform UK offer that's different? I know you're opposed to net zero policies, and good on you for that, because that's just a simple evidence-based. That's a sanity test for me. It's just one of those key tests for me. But in terms of what, look, in the very unlikely event, given our first past the post system, Richard Tice knows this as well, your leader, you know, realistically, with the best will in the world, you are not going to be elected the next government of this country. And we know what's happened to other parties in the same position before. But you can have a lot of influence, nevertheless. What are the policies that you feel strongly about that Reform UK, if they had the ability to influence policy, that you would actually endorse?
We've got a fully costed contract manifesto, which is available on our website to download. Now, that is based on what we hear from people when we're door knocking. It's great to sit in an ivory tower and pontificate on what people think that people want. But what comes up all of the time is the cost of living crisis. It's the UK energy cost. Look what's happened this morning. It's absolutely in tatters. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation just a couple of weeks ago did a poll of over 5,000 people, and they talked about, do you want tax cuts or increased spending on public services? And 75% responded saying they wanted increase spending on the NHS over any tax
people
cut.
always say that. They always say that, and then when they're offered tax cuts, they vote for that.
Well, Joseph Rowntree Foundation, they should know what we're talking about.
I'm not saying that's not what people said. What people say and what they do on election day are often very different. Lots of people say, for instance, that net zero is a top priority for them when their energy bills goes up, and that goes out the window.
But people have been really, really squeezed. In South Yorkshire here, Red Wall area, yeah, absolutely. People are so squeezed financially. And I get, as a local councillor, I get an inbox full of desperate people. Housing is a major issue. The recent dental recovery plan, which cost 200 million, yeah, that's fine, but that's a very good example of core services being run down to an absolute bare minimum. The national insurance saving cost £10 billion and 200 million, only 200 million spent on a dental recovery plan. This is what people really, really are concerned about.
But you talked about cost of living as the #1 issue, and a lot of people say, okay, well, so what are you going to do differently? We've heard what Labour said they're going to do, heard what the Tories say they're going to do. What would Reform UK do differently to mean that prices will not continue to go up, as they still are, and people would be able to have a more affordable cost of living? What policy?
Firstly, increase the threshold for paying income tax to £20,000. That will put another £1,500 in people's pockets per month. Our manifesto, our contract recognises 150 billion saving. Now that sounds astronomical, but it's not. That's 5 pence in the pound. And only 2 weeks ago, Jeremy Hunt, when he was interviewed in the Daily Telegraph, said we've got to start looking at government inefficiencies. We're the only country that pays interest on quantitative easing money. No other central banks do that across the EU. Why are we paying interest on money that was digitally created? These are fundamental policies. Please take a look. It all stacks up.
I'm just going to say, I mean, we've been promised the efficiency savings by every single party in every single election, for goodness knows, since I've been alive. Never actually seen them.
Julia,
that's a root and branch thing that I don't think anyone's going to get to grip with. Okay, let's talk about what happens.
That happens in business with us, Julia. That happens in business.
Oh, private sector manages it just fine. Private sector productivity has gone up just fine. Public sector, it's gone up by like 1 or 2% in about 20 years. Let's talk about what happens next, okay? There's a lot of talk that other Tory MPs are in discussions, and they'll be talking to people like you in the Red Wall about whether their seats are going to be safer with Reform UK or not. There's also a lot of talk about what happens with Lee Anderson personally. Okay, he becomes a leading figure in the party very quickly. He's very media friendly. People like the cut of his jib, should we say? Should he not, though, stand for a by-election? Given that he only a few years ago actually backed a bill in the Commons which wanted an automatic recall for MPs who crossed the floor. He was elected in Ashfield as a Conservative candidate. He's no longer a Conservative. Doesn't he? Well, shouldn't he act on supposedly on his principles a few years ago with that bill and actually actually resign and stand for a by-election? And if he believes that the people of Ashfield still want him as an MP, he'll have no fear of that.
Let's look at this realistically, Julia. When is the next general election going to be called? It could be called any time. The general election could be called while we're still trying to sort out a by-election in Ashfield. And I looked closely yesterday at the reaction on Lee Anderson's social media. He's got a big following, very influential. I looked very closely to see what sort of reaction was going to be there. And if there was much negativity, there wasn't. The people are behind him and behind his move to Reform UK. So Lee is completely confident that he's doing a fantastic job as a constituency MP, and that people are backing him. So, are we going to waste a load of taxpayers' money fighting a by-election that Lee's probably going to win anyway?
If there wasn't a guaranteed election this year within a matter of months, should he hold a by-election? Well, if the election wasn't for another year, should he hold the by-election?
Well, the election isn't going to be another year, is it? We know that.
If your defence... No, your argument is there's going to be an election called very soon anyway, either in May or October, November, in which case it's an unnecessary extra expense. And that's an argument. It may not be a convincing argument for many, but if that is your argument, then if there wasn't going to be another election, if we were mid-term, if there wasn't going to be another election for another year at least, would you say he should stand for a by-election?
Lee didn't win by a tiny majority. Lee's very...
So the argument about cost is irrelevant and the argument about election is irrelevant. You're just saying he's got the support, it doesn't matter.
Well, no, not necessarily. But if the Prime Minister called an election in December, that may be something to look at. But we know that's not going to happen.
We know that's not going to happen soon. In terms of what's happening, let's say Tory MPs talking about defecting. There's also, we understand, Tory MPs, well, some are being very public about how they want the government to change course. Other Tory MPs are talking about even trying to topple yet another Tory leader and Prime Minister. The role of parties like Reform UK over the years in Britain, because we don't have a proportional representation system, have largely been to sort of force the hand, largely actually, of the Conservative Party, whether it's getting a promise of an EU referendum in 2015, for which, which effectively brought a load of UKIP voters back. I mean, 3.8 million still voted for UKIP, but also Brexit parties standing down 300 candidates in 2019 to get Brexit through and back Boris effectively in many seats. Is the role of Reform UK to one day get elected as a government, or is the role of Reform UK to, as many suspect, and Richard Tyson said to people, to destroy the Conservative Party and push them out of power?
No, Reform have got a long-term plan to form a government. I was in the Conservative Party at chairman level, at South Yorkshire chairman level. I know the figures, I know the memberships, I know the support, I know everything. And the first thing I did when I first spoke to Reform was, let's have a look at some of your figures. Let's see what's happening. It's breathtaking. It's breathtaking. The support out there will surprise a lot of people. And I know that our Conservative friends will say they're a small party. And I know the figures. I know how many people joined the party yesterday. I know how many people.
Well, why don't you tell us? That's not secret. Tell us how many people joined yesterday. I mean, one of our audience members told us yesterday that he had joined as a result of Lee Anderson's defection. So give us a number.
Yeah, it's a staggering figure.
Thousands?
And
tens of thousands?
Yes.
Tens
of thousands. You
wouldn't
expect me to disclose that information, but
tens of thousands of people joined as new members yesterday.
No, I didn't say that. You said that, Julie.
No,
but again,
that's
your secondary.
Thousands.
Yes.
Thousands. Okay, but under 10,000.
What I'm saying is the support is out there, and it will shock a lot of people. And people on the doorstep say to me, why should I vote for you, David, as Reform UK? What good would having 2 or 3 MPs in the House of Commons do? Well, it's starting already. We're pushing back. We can challenge. We're unwhipped. We've got coherent policies that people agree with. Lee Anderson read through our document, he read through our manifesto and agreed with everything in there. The number of people, activists and people on the doorstep who've read this fully agree. They say to me by email and by text, Dave, I can't disagree with anything in there. It's common sense.
Well,
so yeah, we're a force to be reckoned with, and clearly with the third party already. What's going to happen in the next couple of months?
We shall wait and see. It's going to be very interesting. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Councillor David White, former Tory himself, Reform UK's parliamentary candidate.